Nobody was supposed to know about those sessions. No cameras, no journalists, no publicists hovering nearby taking notes. Just two men in a private space. One of them, the biggest movie star on the planet. The other, the most dangerous human being that movie star had ever been in a room with. Steve McQueen kept that secret for years. And when pieces of it finally started coming out, through friends, through training partners, through people who had been told things in confidence and eventually felt the world deserved to know, what they revealed was not what anyone expected, because what McQueen witnessed in those sessions didn't just change how he trained, it changed how he thought about everything. Stay with me, because this story starts in a place nobody ever looks, and ends somewhere that will completely reframe what you think you know about both of these men. It's 1966. Steve McQueen is at the absolute peak of his power. The Great Escape has already cemented him as a superstar. Bullitt is 2 years away. He is the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. He is on the cover of every magazine. He is the definition of cool in an era when cool was the most valuable currency in the world. And he is deeply, privately, almost obsessively interested in martial arts. This wasn't casual. McQueen didn't dabble. He had trained in judo. He had trained in boxing. He had spent years building a physical toughness that was genuine, not Hollywood fake, not stunt double dependent. He could handle himself. He knew it. The people around him knew it. But something was missing, some quality he'd seen glimpses of but couldn't name. A level of physical mastery he'd caught fragments of in films, in demonstrations, in stories told by people who'd been to Asia and come back different. He'd been hearing a name, quietly at first, then louder. Bruce Lee. The introduction happened through Jay Sebring, McQueen's hairdresser, one of his closest friends, a man who moved through Hollywood society with ease and knew everyone worth knowing. Sebring had seen Bruce Lee demonstrate his skills at a private gathering and had come away from it visibly shaken in a way that was completely out of character. He told McQueen, "Try to describe what he'd seen." McQueen listened, asked one question. "How do I meet him?" The meeting was arranged, low-key, no entourage on either side, just the two of them in a space cleared of everything that wasn't necessary. Bruce Lee was 25 years old. He was not physically imposing by conventional standards. 5'7", 130 pounds. In a room full of Hollywood people, he would not have stood out. Nothing about his appearance announced what he was. That was the first thing that got to McQueen. Later, he said it was the stillness, the complete absence of the performance that most people, especially most people in Hollywood, layer onto themselves in every social situation. Bruce Lee was simply there, present in a way that was almost startling. Then Bruce Lee moved, and everything changed. What McQueen saw that first day is the thing he spent years trying and failing to describe adequately. He tried several times in interviews, always carefully, always leaving certain things out the way people do when they've experienced something they know sounds impossible and they've learned to protect the story by not overclaiming it. But the people who trained alongside McQueen in those years, the ones he talked to in private, have filled in what the interviews left out. The speed was the first thing, always the first thing with Bruce Lee. Everyone who encountered him said the same. Not athletic speed, not trained reflexes speed. Something categorically different. Something that seemed to operate outside the normal relationship between intention and execution. McQueen was a man who trusted his instincts, who had spent years developing the ability to read a physical situation before it fully developed. In his training, in his racing, he drove motorcycles and cars competitively, genuinely, not for show. He had built a set of physical instincts he relied on completely. Bruce Lee made those instincts useless. Not because he was unpredictable in a random way, the opposite. Every movement Bruce Lee made was precise, intentional, completely controlled. But the timing was so perfect, the economy of motion so absolute, that McQueen's instincts had nothing to grab onto. Nothing arrived with enough warning to respond to. After that first session, McQueen drove home alone and didn't call anyone. He needed to think. He hired Bruce Lee immediately. Regular sessions, private, serious money. More per hour than McQueen was paying his entire stunt team combined. And here's where the story goes somewhere nobody talks about. Because within a few weeks, something shifted in those sessions that neither man had entirely anticipated. They started talking, not about technique, not about forms or positions or the mechanics of this strike versus that one. They talked about everything else, about pressure and performance, about what it meant to be at the top of a profession and still feel like you were operating below your own potential, about the specific loneliness of being exceptionally good at something that most people around you only partially understood. McQueen was one of the most famous humans on Earth. He was surrounded by people constantly. He was rarely alone. He was profoundly lonely in the way that very specific kind of success produces. Bruce Lee understood this, not theoretically, personally. He was operating in a world, Hollywood, the entertainment industry, the particular intersection of East and West he'd been navigating his entire adult life, that had categories for what he was supposed to be and no category at all for what he actually was. Two men at the top of very different worlds. Both of them slightly outside the neat definitions their worlds had prepared for them. That's what those sessions actually were, underneath the technique and the physical training. That's the secret that stayed secret for 30 years. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. Let's talk about what Bruce Lee was actually teaching in those sessions, because it wasn't what most people assume. Yes, there was physical training. Yes, McQueen learned. He improved in ways that his other training had never produced. Faster, more economical, more instinctive. People who sparred with him after those sessions noticed the difference immediately. But the physical training was almost secondary to something else. Bruce Lee was developing what he called Jeet Kune Do, his own martial arts philosophy, his own system, the thing that would eventually be recognized as one of the most significant innovations in the history of combat sports. And the core of it wasn't a technique. It wasn't a stance or a strike or a defensive position. It was a way of thinking. The idea was this: most martial arts systems teach you a set of responses. This happens, you do this. That happens, you do that. You drill the responses until they're automatic, until you don't have to think, you just react. Bruce Lee looked at that approach and saw the limitation in it immediately. Because the moment your response becomes automatic, the moment you stop thinking and start reacting from a script, you become predictable. And a predictable fighter, no matter how technically excellent, is a vulnerable fighter. What Jeet Kune Do trained instead was presence. Pure, complete, unfiltered presence in the moment. No script, no predetermined responses, just total awareness of what was actually happening, not what you expected to happen, not what usually happened, not what your training told you was coming, what was actually, specifically, uniquely happening right now. And then responding to that, freshly, without the filter of habit. McQueen absorbed this, completely, and he didn't just apply it to fighting. Here's the thing that his closest collaborators noticed in the years after those sessions with Bruce Lee. McQueen changed as an actor, not dramatically, not in a way that made headlines or got analyzed in reviews, but the people who worked closely with him, directors, co-stars, crew members who were paying attention, noticed something different. He became more present on camera. In his earlier work, McQueen was already magnetic, already doing something special, but there was occasionally a quality of performance, a slight sense of someone executing a well-rehearsed approach to a scene, hitting marks that worked, applying a method that produced results. After Bruce Lee, something loosened. He started responding to what was actually happening in a scene, rather than what he'd decided was going to happen in rehearsal. He started listening, really listening, to his scene partners instead of waiting for his cue. The performances got quieter, more specific, more real. Bullet, The Getaway, Papillon. These are the films that came after Bruce Lee entered his life. Watch them with this in mind. Watch McQueen's eyes. Something is present there that is harder to find in the earlier work. Something that looks, if you know what you're looking for, remarkably like what Bruce Lee spent his life trying to teach. The sessions continued for years, on and off, around both men's schedules, through the production demands that pulled them in different directions. And during that time, McQueen did something that surprised everyone around him. He tried to get Bruce Lee a real role. A lead, not a sidekick, not a supporting part, a genuine leading role in a major Hollywood film. He had the leverage to make that conversation happen, and he had it repeatedly. The answer kept coming back in the careful, polite, immovable language that Hollywood uses when it has decided something. Not yet. The audience isn't ready. The numbers don't support it. Maybe later. McQueen pushed. He was not a man who accepted maybe later easily. He pushed until the pushing started to cost him something in terms of relationships he needed to maintain. And then he stopped pushing. He never fully forgave himself for stopping. This is one of the things that came out in later years through people who knew him well, that McQueen felt he had not done enough, that he had seen exactly what Bruce Lee was, had understood it more completely than almost anyone in Hollywood, and had not found a way to make the industry see it too. Bruce Lee was dead before McQueen could try again. July 20th, 1973. McQueen heard the news the way everyone did. A phone call, words that didn't make sense, then made too much sense, then settled into the specific weight of permanent loss. He didn't do interviews about it. He didn't make statements. He went quiet in the way that men of his generation went quiet when something hit them somewhere they didn't have words for. But people who were around him in the days after said he was different, visibly, quietly different, like a room where something had been removed, and the space where it was more noticeable than the thing itself had been. Enter the Dragon came out 6 weeks later. McQueen saw it. Of course he saw it. He sat in a theater and watched the thing he had known was possible, had known for years, had argued for in rooms where the argument fell on deaf ears, finally be real on a screen. He watched an audience respond to Bruce Lee the way Bruce Lee deserved to be responded to, and he sat with the knowledge that it had come too late, 20 years too late, 20 years of sidekick roles and canceled projects and industry politeness that meant no, 20 years of a system insisting it knew better than the evidence in front of its face. What McQueen felt in that theater is something that stayed private. He talked around it, but never directly at it. Maybe he didn't have the language. Maybe some things are too specific to the grief of witnessing avoidable waste to be said out loud. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. Here's the moral, and it's not a comfortable one. Steve McQueen, a man with more power in Hollywood than almost anyone of his era, a man who understood exactly what Bruce Lee was, a man who tried to use that power on Bruce Lee's behalf, was not enough. One person, even a powerful one, even a genuine one, was not enough to move a machine that had decided what it believed. Bruce Lee moved the machine himself, by going around it, by building something so undeniable in Hong Kong that Hollywood had to come to him. That's not an uplifting story about how talent always wins. It's a story about the cost of systems that refuse to see what's in front of them, about the years lost, the work unmade, the films that don't exist because the doors were closed a decade too long. Bruce Lee made Enter the Dragon at 32 years old. He never got to make the film he would have made at 40. We don't know what that film would have been. We never will. And that gap, that permanent, unfillable gap between what existed and what could have existed. That is what Steve McQueen was sitting with in that theater. That is the secret those private sessions were always carrying.